Well, hello there and welcome to Lunchtime News here on TV1. You're joining me, David Paldano. Now, before heading to your stories in more detail, let's first take a look at your headlines this afternoon. Two whales from the stranded pod and a dolphin reported dead in Panadura. Number of COVID-19 patients at 11,335.
පොකුරේ මූලික වශයෙන් අපිට පේන මේ සිය ගණනින් රෝගීන් වාර්තා වීම තවත් සතියක් එකමාරක් විතර යාවි.
Wholesale essential food item shops in Peta open for business. The NBRO says there is an abnormal increase in the air pollution in the country. Now on to headline-making stories this afternoon. A special operation began last afternoon to return several whales that had been stranded on the Panadura coast back to the sea. In a tragic turn of events, 2 dead whales and a dolphin washed up on the beaches of the Panadura and Talpitia this morning. More than 100 whales have been stranded on the Panadura beach yesterday, prompting residents, police life-saving unit officers and the Navy to launch an operation to return them to sea. The exercise that ran into the night saw several whales being pushed back into the ocean thanks to the residents and rescue teams who risked their lives amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, a whale that was seen floating near the Panadura coast this morning was pushed back to the sea following the untiring efforts of the police life-saving officers, Navy officials and area residents. A few months ago, a large number of whales had been stranded similarly along the Australian coast. Marine biologists say that pilot whales travel in large pods and that if one gets pushed into the beach, there is a high chance that the others will follow. Experts point out that whales might have washed up onto the shore due to the damage caused to their sensitive organs as a result of radar signals in the ocean. The whales have a sensitive and specialized air sac on their forehead that can produce, emit and receive sounds. These air sacs can be damaged if high-frequency signals are emitted by sonar on vessels. To relieve themselves of the difficulties that they face due to these sonars, they dive deep into the ocean. This causes them to lose track of their movement. That is why this occurs. Marine biologist Dr. Asha DeVos said that the beaching of large numbers of pilot whales on the coast is not an uncommon occurrence. Meanwhile, a dead whale had washed up on the Panadura coast this morning, while another dead whale and dolphin had washed up on the Talpitia coast in Vadua. A post-mortem examination on the dead mammals was carried out by the officials attached to the Marine Environment Protection Authorities and the veterinary attached to the Aptidia Wildlife Office Suhada Jayawardena. Officers attached to the Marine Environment Protection Authority and the Police Life-Saving Unit at the Panadura beach are remaining vigilant over the current situation. Meanwhile, the forest ranger attached to the Wildlife Conservation Department, G1 Hapwarachi, visited the Talpitia coast to inspect the mammals that had washed up onto the beach. A dead whale had washed up onto the beach. Another dolphin had washed up as well. The Wildlife Department is conducting an inquiry into this. We will report additional matters about this incident. Right now, we are getting live updates about what is currently going on regarding the rescue of these stranded whales. We are now joined by Newsfirst Senator Sena Naika to give us the latest update in his area. Senator, tell us what exactly is going on in the area and can you describe what's happening there right now?
Thank you, David. As you know, the Newsfirst team has been covering this extraordinary incident that took place on this very beach yesterday at around 2:30 p.m. More than 60 whales beached themselves, and by the end of last night, with great efforts by the officers of the Navy, police and the wildlife department. Those whales were released back to the ocean. However, by this morning, the body of one dead whale was stranded on this beach, and as you can see behind me, the relevant officials are conducting the post-mortem examination on that whale, and we have gotten reports 6 kilometers from this very location towards Wadua, a body of another dead dolphin was also found, and the officials are trying their very best to understand the possible reason behind this incident. So stay tuned to News First for updated information about this incident. I'm Senita Sinanayaka reporting from Panadura.
Thank you, Senator, for that update. And as he said, you can stay tuned with News First as we bring you the very latest updates regarding what is going on regarding the whale stranding in the country. Now, shifting our attention towards the current COVID-19 situation in the country, Sri Lanka's tally of COVID-19 infections has risen to 11,335. This was after 275 patients had tested positive for the virus yesterday. According to the Government Information Department, yesterday's patients were linked to the Paligoda cluster. Accordingly, the total COVID-19 infections in the Diulapitia and Paligoda clusters has risen to 7,857. Official figures released by the Health Ministry's Epidemiology Unit show that 6,065 patients are under medical care. 344 patients had recovered from the virus, raising the total number of recoveries to 5,249. The Deputy Director General of Public Health Services, Dr. Hemantha Herath, expressed these views on the current situation of COVID-19 pandemic in the country.
මිනුවන්ගොඩින් රෝගීන් හමුවන අවස්ථාවේදීත් සමාජයේ සක්‍රිය ජීවිතයක් ගත කරන
In the case of the patients who are being detected in the Minuwangoda cluster, we can observe that most of them are young and healthy individuals who are active in the community. Since the inception, we have been stressing that sick people, the elderly, children and expectant mothers may experience more complications if they contract the virus. The number of new cases at present is comparatively lower to the infections detected in the last few days. However, this does not rule out the possibility of identifying more patients in the coming days. The pattern of detecting large numbers of patients linked to these clusters is likely to continue for another week and a half. It will require about 6 or 8 weeks to minimize the number of patients and completely eradicate a cluster. We can observe that it is important for a PCR test to be carried out on all deceased individuals. That is because a large percentage of deceased people have tested positive for COVID-19. Therefore, we must take this into serious consideration.
හඳුනාගෙන තියෙනවා මේ නිසා මේකත් බරපතල ලෙස අපි සැලකී
Wholesale stores in Peta selling essential food items were allowed to resume business at 5 a.m. today. Accordingly, wholesale stores in the 4th and 5th Cross Street were opened in the morning. Lorries transporting essential food items from other provinces arrived in the area today. This is an unnecessary mechanism. This will be successful only if they allow lorries to be parked on the line and permit the loading of goods onto them. However, this is a futile exercise since the lorries are not allowed to enter the premises. However, the Association of Essential Goods Importers and Traders Union said that only a few traders had arrived in the area to purchase goods this morning. There are no lorries or traders. Business activities can take place properly only if there are lorries to load goods. The lorries are parked a kilometer from this location. Since we sell items in a large stock, it is not practical. The situation would have been different if we engaged in retail trading. The police have said that curfew permits are not required for factories operating under the approval of the Board of Investment and the Export Development Board.
විශේෂයෙන්ම නිෂ්පාදනයට ඒ වගේම අපනයනයට අදාළ කර්මාන්ත සම්බන්ධව
Yesterday we announced that factories involved in the manufacturing and export sectors must email an application to the Secretary at the Water Supply Ministry to obtain curfew passes in order to continue operations. Accordingly, industries involved in the construction, fisheries, agriculture and plantation sectors must obtain permits to continue operations amidst the curfew. However, enterprises that are approved by the Board of Investment and the Export Development Board will not be required to obtain those curfew permits. They will not be required to seek permission to continue operations as well. They can function as usual. Today, the Speaker informed the Parliament that he had approved the 20th constitutional amendment that was passed recently.
වේදනයේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා ප්‍රජාතාන්ත්‍රික
Under the provisions of Article 79 of the Constitution of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, I wish to inform the Parliament that I have signed the blueprint of the 20th Amendment that was passed on the 29th of October.
පතේ සහතිකය සටහන් කරන ලද බව පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට දැනුම් දීමට කැමැත්තෙමි.
The National Building Research Organization has found that air quality levels have dropped unusually in certain parts of the country. It made these observations in a report on the current atmospheric conditions on the island. Senior scientist at the National Building Research Organization, Sarat Premasri, said the particulate matter in the atmosphere in the Colombo, Kandy, Puttalam, Vaunia and Jaffna districts had increased abnormally since the 27th of this month. He pointed out that this situation had arisen since polluted air in the Indian subcontinent had entered Sri Lanka's atmosphere due to winds blowing in the direction of the country. According to the National Building Research Organization, this situation is unhealthy for sensitive groups. Accordingly, health authorities have urged children, the elderly, expectant mothers and individuals experiencing respiratory illnesses to exercise caution in the coming days as the situation is likely to persist. Meanwhile, a smog was witnessed in the Kandy town and the mountainous areas in the region due to this situation.
The air has become polluted, especially in the Kandy district, due to the changing atmospheric patterns. This situation occurs when the air pollutant matter called PM2.5 increases in the atmosphere. According to the National Building Research Organization, the air pollutant called PM2.5 has increased to a great extent in the area. This will have an impact on all forms of life, including humans. The pollutant particles will enter our bodies when we inhale them. Therefore, this can cause some allergies in the lungs or any other organ.
අසාත්මික සාවයන් සහ විවිධ වූ හානිකර තත්ත්වයන් ඇතිවෙනවා. මහනුවර නගරයේ සහ
The air is not clean in the Kandy town and the mountainous areas. The situation due to air pollution is very critical. The Central Environment Authority had set up an air quality monitoring station in the Kandy town. This is an automated system. However, it is sad to note that the data is not accurate. By today, the monitoring station is inactive.
නිවැරදි නැහැ. දැන් අද මේ වෙනකොටත් මේක අක්‍රිය තත්ත්වයට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා.
An investigation has been launched into the sudden death of a mother who was admitted to the Maravilla hospital. Relatives of the deceased alleged that there were delays in fact in treating her by the hospital staff after she was suspected to have been infected with COVID-19. The deceased was a mother of a 17-day-old infant. The woman was admitted to the Maravilla hospital for the first time on the 15th of October for the delivery of her child. She had given birth to the baby on the 16th. She then had returned home on the 18th and was hospitalized again on the 31st of the same month.
When we took our daughter to the hospital, we were isolated with suspicion of COVID-19. There was no treatment done to my daughter. At around 12:10, she was put in an isolation room where they did some treatments. We were treated unfairly. She only had phlegm, but they didn't do any treatment for the phlegm.
They did not do anything. At least they could have transferred her to the ICU. How did they suspect that she had contracted COVID-19? The public health inspector in our area spoke to me. Then I told him that we don't have COVID-19 in our area. He agreed and told me that he will inform the hospital. However, they didn't treat her. They just isolated my wife in the COVID-19 ward and let her die there.
Puttalam District Deputy Director of Health Services Dinusha Fernando stated that according to the PCR test conducted on the deceased, it is revealed that she was not infected with COVID-19. She further stated that it is suspected that the woman may have died due to complications that arose after giving birth to her child. The central bank forecast Sri Lanka's GDP to shrink by 1.7% in 2020.
According to a report published by the central bank yesterday, Sri Lanka's gross domestic product, which currently stands at 3.8 trillion rupees at market price, is projected to shrink 1.7% in 2020 and recover to a 5% growth in 2021. The central bank's forecast on GDP growth is significantly higher when compared to the latest forecasts of the World Bank and the Asia Development Bank. The World Bank last month projected Sri Lanka's economy to shrink by 6.7% 6% in 2020, while the ADB in September projected Sri Lanka's GDP growth rate to decline by 5.5% in 2020. The central bank in its statement further added that the GDP forecast for 2020 reflects the impact of the pandemic-induced fallout, particularly in the second quarter of the year. GDP estimates for the second quarter have not yet been released by the Department of Census and Statistics, citing difficulties in capturing the true nature of disruptions and new activities that emerged this year with the onset of the pandemic. According to the report, Sri Lanka's trade deficit is projected to fall to 6.6% of GDP, while the current account deficit is projected to shrink to 1.5% in 2020. Sri Lanka's budget deficit is projected to expand to 9.3% of GDP in 2020. According to the central bank, high-frequency data point towards a strong recovery in many areas of economic activity in more recent months prior to the resurgence of COVID-19 infections and resultant containment measures in October this year. According to the central bank, the unemployment rate in the country increased to 5.6% in the first half of this year and thereafter declined to 5.4% in the second quarter. Unemployment among youth aged 20 to 29 years rose to 18.5% in the first half of 2020 from 14.8% in the same period of the preceding year.
Well, that is a wrap of lunchtime news here on TV1. For more news, log on to our award-winning website, that is www.newsfirst.lk. For the Newsfirst team, I'm David Paldana. Take care.